Okay, this week's assignment is landscapes. In the past, I have called it Picture the South. Um, and so there's a bunch of different ways there that you can approach the idea of the landscape. Mainly, we're talking about places, spaces um, that, you know, um, showcase the region, the city, the town, um, and the topography of a particular place. Now, there's been a long tradition with the grand American landscape, and that begins with the great Ansel Adams. He was a black and white film photographer um, at the turn of the 20th century, and he has taken some of the most remarkable photographs of the American West. And he was one who shared um, his experience and his knowledge with as many people who wanted to hear it from him. He was basically interested in Mother Nature and her impact on the landscape. So oftentimes he would wait for storms to come in, and when the clouds were just right and the way the sun was breaking through, he would painstakingly wait, sometimes for days, for the perfect shot. And he would take several different um, photographs, but waiting, hoping for something that he felt was really dynamic and left America looking beautiful, which he was able to achieve through most of his photographs. Now, he's not the type of guy who would just go to a scenic overpass and, park and walk up to the railing and take a picture. No, he would camp, he would go out trekking through uncharted roads, and he turned his SVU. On the top of it, he built a platform where he could stand on top of there with his camera and get a really good perspective. But again, he would live in his car sometimes for a couple days waiting for the clouds to change. This one I love. Typical landscapes are always photographed horizontally, but there's no rule to that. So you might experiment with rotating your camera. To me, the horizon line is way down here. Okay. And then, the vast mountains still look grand and everything, but the sky makes it almost miniaturizing the mountains, and it gives it a real sense of scale and place, and I think kind of opens up a whole new ideas for people to think, ways of people to think about the landscape. This is a interesting story. This is called Moonrise over Hernandez, and you can see the light is just about to set, but it's illuminating this graveyard that's kind of next to the town. You can see the crosses and everything. And Ansel notices this on his way back from shooting one day. And he doesn't have very long. He takes barely a light meter reading and takes one shot, and then the sun sets before he can take another shot. So a man who's known for waiting for days and days takes this remarkable photograph. And this was one of the first photographs to sell for a high price at an auction. So this was pretty remarkable and ironic. But he has captured some of the most uniquely American spots, and has done it in a way that really celebrates the land. In these images, you don't see any evidence of men. You don't see cars and streets and things like that. It's not about humans' impact on the nature. It's just about the grand American landscapes. Now, we have areas around here that you could photograph doing that for sure, but there are other ways also to photograph the landscape. But he was particularly good um, at this large depth of field, you know, just beautiful, serene places. Edward Weston was a contemporary of Ansel Adams. Ansel Adams invented all different ways of exposing your film in order to get the optimal tonal range and things like that. Now, we're not dealing with that. Our sensors, are kind of dealing with that. But Edward Weston also only photographed, well, no, I'm lying. He didn't only photograph landscapes, but he did photograph quite a bit of landscapes. Here, he's removing any sense of scale. So we could be looking at an aerial view of mountain ranges, or we could be looking at something much smaller. It's hard to tell because we don't, exactly know what it is and how big this place is. You might argue that this is a river or a stream, but without the horizon line, it makes it a little bit more abstract. It doesn't explain everything. And here, this is not a great slide. I apologize for that, but he's turned these sand dunes and the shadows from the sand dunes into these abstracted shapes. And so we get caught up in the texture of the sand and these big, shapes of shadows, and again, kind of abstracting the landscape, making it into something else. What else could it be? And this is another one. I mean, I almost see, the evolution of man here, almost. Then I think we might go, I don't know what that is, but again, just looking at the topography, just looking at the texture of land, just looking at shape, shadows, form, all of that. Very, very interesting. So this is, it's grand, there's absence of man, but he's really taking a more formal approach, concentrating on the formal elements of design: line, shape, texture, space, scale, value, color. I think, did I mention color? I can't remember. Here's another one. He lived in Carmel, and so photographed, around that area, but he also traveled to Mexico quite a bit. And so he's done, but he's very, very interested in, this is a great rock formation. Love it. Love it. Here's another, again, look at the texture on the surface of these hills. Is that trees? Is it mud? What is causing this? And then how big of a space are we looking at here? Just a simple, looking at the tide, the foam, the colors of the beach. Just really beautiful. William Eggleston. So there are a lot of landscape masters that did landscapes before color film was anything that was stable. And that's why if you think about some of the old color photos you may have around your house or your family has, they're all kind of faded because they weren't very stabilized. William Eggleston is one of my favorite photographers and one of the first major color landscape photographers. And this is Atlanta, long time ago. And he loves this very strong diagonal in his composition, and you'll notice that quite a bit if you study his work. The one thing I want to tell you is I want you to try to stay away from having your horizon line in the middle. This one's kind of in the middle. I would probably argue that it's lower down here, but he's activating the space with this strong vertical, and then he's activating up here with the buildings, this curved line. Every kind of space has some kind of element in it so that it doesn't feel like empty, dull space. And so think about that. Where is your horizon going to be? What's more interesting when you're looking through your viewfinder? Is it the foreground? Is it the background? And think about the things you learned while you were thinking about the light and shadows, because that's completely important with landscape photographs. This is not a dead dog. It's kind of a community dog that is sleeping, taking a nap. This perspective is great. Always getting up high and shooting low. That's much more difficult. So now this one breaks my rules of putting the horizon line in the middle. And I would want him to crop it differently. But I enjoy the kind of social sentiment behind this. This is chemicals that someone dumped out at this dead end place. And we have those spots around town. Maybe you live next to one. Maybe you know where you've dumped stuff. I don't know, hopefully not, but um, there's so much out there right now with global warming and all of that. Why don't not concentrate on that reality? Kevin Kline is I think he's from Tennessee. I want to say Memphis, but I could be wrong. And I'm putting him in here. He does black and white, but he does urban landscapes. And I do urban landscapes. And that just means I live near downtown. I photograph my neighborhood. And I think that also can define a place. It's the buildings, it's the people, it's, the decorations outside of a bar or restaurant. It's someone standing on the street that you may know, or maybe a neighbor or something like that. But all of this kind of defines a locale, a very specific area. And I think for me, I find it very interesting. I think it's very telling. I have Instagram page where I walk to work because I live near downtown, very close to the WA building. And every day I walk to work, I try to remember to take a photograph and I put it on Instagram. And by restricting myself to these 4 blocks or however many that I walk, and having to take the picture of something I see every day, I find it challenging, but also very exciting. So you can check my stuff out on Instagram, but there is something about photographing the businesses and people of where you work, where you live, where you spend a lot of time. Now, Burke Uzzell, this is a self-portrait here. He famously photographed Woodstock. So a lot of the Woodstock images you will find are from him. And he lives here in North Carolina. I think he lives in Wilson, North Carolina. And his landscapes are really about color. To me, this is almost a banal, almost kind of a boring shot, right? We're looking at some, ugly purple building, made of metal with a trailer that's painted orange against the blue sky. I mean, all of these colors are just popping out and very vibrant. Here we've got red, white, and blue. Most of the things here are red, white, and blue. And, there are a lot of farms around here. There's not just, you don't have to go to the beach to take a picture. And please, refrain from doing the pier. Find your spots that only you know about. Where's your fishing hole? Where's your bike path? Things like that. Use your life. This is an Exxon station and a self-storage. Again, kind of interesting view on things. I'm thinking the color blue in this. The pool water is blue, the house is blue, the sky is blue. Yeah. Here's another one, I think just beautiful. Look at this retention wall is made out of old tires. I don't know how long that'll take for it to biodegrade. Now, this is some photographs taken down in Louisiana after the storms down there. A lot of photographers tend to go to areas after, devastation has hit. And the photographer went, they were rebuilding and doing all that and just kind of photographed things that he came across. And this to me is a great landscape and portrait. There's no reason you can't have people in your portrait. And the damage done to the shipping industry, or the shrimping, sorry. All kinds of hand-painted signs and markers. This one, this is kind of a crazy one because it's a portrait, but then, he's talking about New Orleans is in the bottom of the boot. It's down, near here. So that's what they call that area. So it's showing the state on the fellow's arm. Alex Soth does some interesting portraits, and also photographs people, transient people, or people off the grid, trying to live off the grid. So these next couple photographs are people who live along the Mississippi River. And as you know, the Mississippi floods and all of that, so they have to move their stuff, or it's just not very nice stuff. But all along the Mississippi, you can see these little campsites where people stay. And this interesting man is living off the grid. So he's living up in the mountains, um, you know, no internet, that kind of stuff. Oops, this is a horrible slide. But fishing, I mean, photograph you and your friends fishing. If you go to a carnival or any kind of amusement park or whatever, take your camera with you. This is very about the South because there are churches. There are so many churches. But just photographs of a church steeple get boring really quick. And so how else can you photograph the church and the space it surrounds it? This is tricky. So it's very easy to take the same old pictures with landscape and not be very exciting. So this is kind of a challenging assignment. I want you to see if you can come up with something that is about the space or the place and the people who live in those places, but also make it visually stunning. I love this image. This kind of trailer park aspect of what's going on around them, and I just really kind of enjoy this. Nice low horizon line down here. Try to capture the fog. This is, I mean, it's just very interesting that they're at this rest stop, but nobody's looking at the beautiful space behind them. They're all staring at a parking lot. If you do derby racing, or I'm not sure what kind of racing, car racing this is, photograph that. Or you go on a how high can your dog climb a tree event, photograph that. If you go, camping in the woods or hunting in the woods, whatever, photograph that. I don't know why I showed that one. Okay, here's another black and white, some photograph. This guy, David, is in Memphis because it's all Elvis. So what, besides the Green Bridge, the ship that's downtown, and the piers, what else defines Wilmington? There's so many other places. Try to find a unique spot. Again, more Elvis everywhere. This, again, kind of an urban landscape. Sorry about the quality of this image. I didn't realize it. This is a baptism, right? So this is happening to a lot of towns around town, empty storefronts or a corn dog stand in front of the government building. This one is questionably a landscape, not so obviously, but I think, what it shows is change, because in the mural on the state building, it's all white people, and then the current leaders are all people of color. And so that modernization of time and equality is shown in this image. This one just makes me laugh. People make some crazy yard signs. Beat me up. Absolutely. Right? People go fishing all around here. We could take this. This is in Florida, but this could be here in Wilmington. I like this perspective. This is Cuba. This is a pointing at Florida through the windshield. The most northern point of Cuba. Okay, so students have photographed Huma Gray Park. Actually, no, this is Greenfield Lake. My bad. Beautiful. The beaches, but not just the beach. There used to be, I think, a place you could dump oyster shells around here, but it's kind of a dead end road. My issue here is I think the lighting is not the great time to shoot, you know, really earlier in the morning or later at night, or this just seems a little light. I think probably too they could have used the levels to darken this just a little bit. But they're using their horizons fairly well. This one, his horizon's crooked, but there's something kind of nice about the anchor leading us to the boat. You know, again, this is urban landscapes. Photograph around your house, your front yard, your neighbor's front yard. This is Fort Fisher. Can you come up with a more interesting picture of this tree? I'm sure you can. And tobacco. This is an interesting view of the ocean because most people photograph it, oh, it's a beautiful day, but this shows like the cold and the wind and you know, this one, another great sign, you know, just shows some personality. Barns, we got a lot of barns around here. And beautiful Spanish moss. So, you know, try not to go to the obvious places for this assignment. Try to come up with something very creative, but I do know that it's difficult. So, you know, I know that I'm challenging here. Think about lighting, think about the time of day you're shooting, think about your composition, and you'll do great on this assignment. All right, can't wait to see what you got.